The strongest walls are not built of stone, but of fear, and yet even the highest walls can crumble for the right soul. The shadow of avoidance is not something that emerges suddenly. It is a pattern woven carefully over time, usually beginning in the early chapters of life. For many who carry this inner weight, closeness once felt dangerous, unpredictable, or overwhelming. They learned that safety was not found in the embrace of others, but in retreating into themselves, in building invisible fortresses that shielded them from pain. The child who was neglected, the young soul who felt unseen, or the heart that once extended itself and was shattered, all of these experiences create the foundation of the avoidance protective stance. Their silence, their distance, their reluctance to show emotion are not merely choices made in the present. They are echoes of the past that reverberate into the future. Within this shadow lies a paradox. Outwardly, the avoidant appears self-reliant, independent, untouchable. They may convince themselves that they need no one, that attachment is a trap, and that vulnerability is weakness. Yet beneath this mask of strength lies a fragile and deeply sensitive inner world, one that longs for intimacy but fears its consequences. The shadow is therefore a place of contradiction. It both guards and imprisons. It protects the avoidant from being hurt, but it also denies them the nourishment of true connection. Every relationship they encounter becomes a battlefield between their yearning for closeness and their terror of it. The shadow of avoidance does not simply reject others, it also rejects the self. The avoidant may bury emotions so deeply that even they cannot access them. They may numb themselves with distraction, achievement, or solitude, convincing themselves that this distance is freedom. But the psyche is never content with such suppression. What is buried does not disappear, it waits. It seeps through in subtle ways, in moments of restlessness, in the quiet ache of loneliness, in the sudden anger at being misunderstood. The shadow demands recognition, and when ignored, it grows heavier, shaping the avoidant's life from the hidden corners of the mind. It is crucial to understand that avoidance is not merely about keeping people at a distance. It is about keeping the self untouched by the risk of pain. This is why the shadow feels so heavy for them. They are not only avoiding others, they are avoiding the parts of themselves that still cry out for love, for tenderness, for belonging. The walls they build are double-sided. They keep others away, but they also keep the avoidant trapped inside. Their freedom is an illusion, a carefully guarded prison where the key has been hidden away. Yet, even within this shadow, there is an unspoken truth. The avoidant does not truly reject love itself. They reject the vulnerability that love requires. They dream of connection just as deeply as anyone else, but the cost feels unbearable. To lower the walls feels like exposing an open wound to the world, and so they resist. But the shadow is not meant to be the final destination. It is meant to be confronted. To see it clearly is to recognize that what feels like strength may actually be fear, that what feels like independence may actually be isolation. The shadow of avoidance is therefore not a mark of failure but of humanity. It represents the scars left by old battles, the unhealed wounds of intimacy denied or betrayed. To live in it is to be constantly torn between longing and fear, desire and withdrawal. The avoidant sacrifices pieces of themselves to maintain the illusion of safety, unaware that what they most fear losing is the very thing their heart aches for. And until that truth is faced, the shadow will remain a silent companion, shaping their choices and relationships with unseen hands, guiding them away from the very closeness they secretly yearn for. The unseen bond is perhaps the most mysterious force in the life of the avoidant, for it is not one they consciously choose, nor can they easily explain it away. They are accustomed to keeping people at arm's length, to carefully managing how close others may come, yet there arrives a person whose presence quietly disarms all of their defenses. This is not a bond born of logic or deliberate effort, but of something far deeper, something that bypasses the walls and speaks directly to the hidden soul. While the avoidant has spent years perfecting the art of retreat, they find themselves unable to retreat from this one person. Something within compels them to stay, to engage, to risk, even if it contradicts their usual patterns. The power of this bond lies in its ability to awaken what has long been dormant. The avoidant who has numbed themselves against feeling suddenly feels more than they can bear. The individual who has learned to distrust intimacy now senses an inexplicable trust with this one person, even if it terrifies them. The unseen bond is not built on words or promises, but on an unshakable resonance, a recognition that goes beyond appearances. It feels as if they have known this person long before they met them, as if the encounter was written into the deeper fabric of their existence. This feeling unsettles the avoidant because it cannot be controlled, analyzed, or dismissed. It simply exists, undeniable and potent. Often the avoidant will resist at first. They may test the bond by withdrawing, by creating distance to see if it will fade. Yet each time they find that the connection remains, persistent and unyielding. No matter how far they run, the bond follows them, not in physical proximity but in emotional gravity. They cannot easily escape the pull, for it is not tethered to the surface interactions of daily life, but to something primal and spiritual. This bond is the crack in the fortress, the light that slips through when every door is barred. The unseen bond also carries with it the power of reflection. The person who evokes this connection becomes a mirror, reflecting back the parts of the avoidant that they have long suppressed. Through this mirror, they see not only their fear but also their capacity for love, loyalty, and sacrifice. They are confronted with the truth that their detachment is not the full story of who they are. The bond awakens a more complete version of themselves, one that has been buried beneath years of self-protection. The avoidant cannot help but be drawn to the one who holds this bond, even if it threatens the carefully constructed order of their life. They may not show it outwardly, but internally they begin to bend, to soften, to allow what they never thought they could. The unseen bond compels them to face themselves honestly, to acknowledge desires they have denied, and to consider sacrifices they never imagined making. It strips away the illusion that they are untouchable and reminds them that no amount of distance can erase the human need for profound connection. In the end, this bond is both a challenge and a gift, for it reveals that even the most guarded heart can be reached, and even the most distant soul can be brought closer to love. The great contradiction of the avoidant lies in the way they live by one set of rules for most people, yet abandon those very rules when faced with the one person who penetrates their defenses. For years they have trained themselves to believe that closeness is dangerous, that reliance on another is a form of weakness, and that self-protection must always come before intimacy. They present themselves as strong, independent, and detached, convincing both themselves and others that they cannot be swayed by love or emotional dependency. Yet, in the presence of this singular figure, the mask begins to slip, and what they have always avoided suddenly becomes what they cannot resist. The very things they have spent their life fleeing from, intimacy, vulnerability, and emotional exposure, become the things they are willing to risk everything for. This contradiction unsettles the avoidant deeply. They pride themselves on control, on being the master of their emotions, on never giving someone else the power to hurt them. But when it comes to this person, they find themselves yielding that power, sometimes without realizing it. They may sacrifice their solitude, which has long been their refuge, just to maintain a connection with them. They may bend their rigid routines, abandon their familiar defenses, and place themselves in situations that make them feel exposed, all because of the pull this person exerts on their inner world. What once felt unbearable suddenly feels necessary, even if frightening. It is a battle between their long-standing need for safety and their newfound willingness to risk for love. This contradiction reveals itself in the smallest gestures and the grandest sacrifices alike. The avoidant who once refused to open up begins to share fragments of their inner world. The one who valued distance above all else now seeks moments of closeness. They may not admit it openly, but in their actions, it becomes clear that they are willing to endure discomfort, even pain, for the sake of this one bond. Their rules no longer hold the same weight because this person awakens something deeper than rules, a longing that overrides logic and a devotion that silences fear. This is why it feels like a contradiction. They appear to others, and even to themselves, as though they are breaking the very identity they built for survival. Yet within the contradiction lies their most authentic truth. The avoidance contradiction is not simply about bending for someone else, it is about confronting the parts of themselves they thought were long gone. For most of their life, they have lived by denying their vulnerability. But in sacrificing their defenses for this one person, they are also admitting to themselves that they are capable of love, capable of loyalty, capable of giving in ways they once believed impossible. The contradiction is both terrifying and liberating. It strips away the false sense of invulnerability and exposes the tender human heart that has been hidden in shadows. In this contradiction, the avoidant undergoes a profound transformation. What looks like weakness from the outside is actually strength, for it takes courage to set aside a lifetime of protection for the chance to love deeply. The rules they lived by crumble, not because they were unimportant, but because they were never meant to be permanent. They were scaffolding for survival, not the architecture of a fulfilled life. When the right person arrives, the avoidant learns that sacrifice is not destruction, but rebirth, a chance to finally live not in fear of loss, but in the embrace of connection. This contradiction becomes the doorway to their truest self, even if they step through it trembling. The mirror of the self is one of the most profound experiences an avoidant can encounter, for it shatters the illusion they have carefully crafted about who they are and what they can feel. The one person who slips past their defenses does more than evoke affection or attraction. They awaken a deep recognition. This person becomes a mirror, not in the sense of merely reflecting back admiration or companionship, but in showing the avoidant the very parts of themselves they have hidden, denied, or buried. It is unsettling because the avoidant has long believed they could live without exposing their vulnerability. Yet suddenly, in the presence of this mirror, all the vulnerability they have worked so hard to conceal becomes visible. They cannot escape it, for the reflection does not come from their own mind, but from the undeniable reality of another human being who sees them truly. In this mirror, the avoidant confronts the truth of their inner world. Where they once insisted on self-sufficiency, they now see the longing for connection staring back at them. Where they believed they were immune to love, they now recognize the depth of their capacity to feel. The mirror shows not only the fear and hesitation, but also the tenderness, the loyalty, and the passion they carry within. It is not always a comfortable sight. The mirror also reflects the wounds that shaped them. In seeing themselves through this one person, the avoidant becomes aware of the old scars they still carry: the neglect, the betrayal, the fear of abandonment. These wounds, long buried, rise to the surface, illuminated by the presence of someone who stirs emotions too powerful to ignore. The avoidant may resist this awareness, trying to turn away from the reflection, but the bond compels them to look. It is through this mirror that they see how much of their life has been guided by fear and how much they have sacrificed in the name of protection. This realization is painful, but it is also the first step toward transformation. At the same time, the mirror reveals the beauty of their hidden potential. The person who holds this mirror does not only expose the pain, but also the love that lies dormant beneath it. The avoidant sees themselves capable of devotion, capable of courage, capable of placing another's needs above their own solitude. These qualities may have been invisible to them before, concealed beneath layers of withdrawal and silence, but now they are undeniable. In recognizing this reflection, the avoidant begins to see themselves not as someone broken or incomplete, but as someone who has always carried the capacity for deep connection, even if they feared it. The mirror of the self therefore becomes both a challenge and a gift. It forces the avoidant to see themselves without disguise, but it also offers them the opportunity to embrace their fuller nature. In this reflection, they are reminded that their avoidance is not the entirety of who they are. It is only the mask. Beneath the mask lies a heart that can love profoundly and sacrifice deeply. When the avoidant accepts this mirror instead of fleeing from it, they step closer to the truth of their being, discovering that what they once denied within themselves is in fact the source of their greatest strength. The quiet surrender of the avoidant is unlike the grand gestures often associated with love or devotion. For them, sacrifice does not come wrapped in bold declarations or dramatic acts that draw attention. Instead, it emerges softly, almost imperceptibly, woven into the small shifts in behavior that only someone who truly sees them would recognize. The avoidant, who has long clung to solitude as their sanctuary, begins to trade pieces of it for connection. They may not speak of their sacrifice. They may not even fully understand the depth of what they are giving up, but their actions reveal it. It is a surrender born not out of force, but out of a pull so strong that resisting it feels more painful than yielding. For most of their life, the avoidant has resisted discomfort in relationships, retreating whenever closeness threatened to overwhelm them. Yet for this one person, they remain present even when their instinct is to withdraw. The quietness of their surrender does not make it weaker. It makes it purer, because it is not done for recognition, but for the preservation of a bond that feels irreplaceable. Their surrender is also seen in the subtle ways they prioritize this person above their own comfort. The avoidant who once avoided vulnerability may begin to share parts of their inner world. The one who cherished distance may choose closeness, even when it unsettles them. Though they may never frame it as such, each step toward vulnerability is an offering, a way of saying without words, "You matter more than my fear." The quiet surrender is also found in the way they soften. The avoidant who has built walls of indifference begins to show tenderness. The person who prided themselves on needing no one begins to rely, however cautiously, on the presence of another. It is not dramatic, but it is profound. Their surrender takes shape in the smallest of details: a softened tone of voice, a willingness to listen, a gesture of care that slips past their guarded nature. These are not loud acts, but they are deeply significant because they go against the very patterns that have defined them. Each act of care is a silent renunciation of avoidance itself. What makes this surrender powerful is that it often comes without fanfare. The avoidant does not draw attention to what they have given up, nor do they expect praise for their sacrifices. In fact, they may hardly speak of it at all, as if the act itself were natural. But for someone who has spent a lifetime resisting intimacy, to remain present, to soften, to allow another into the most private spaces of their heart, is nothing short of extraordinary. It is a surrender that transforms them, not through grand external gestures but through quiet, consistent acts of devotion. This quiet surrender becomes the ultimate offering of their guarded heart. It is the moment when fear no longer has the final word, when protection gives way to presence, and when love takes precedence over solitude. Though understated, it carries an immense weight, for it is not just about giving to another. It is about reclaiming the parts of themselves they thought were forever lost to avoidance. The journey of the avoidant is not defined by their distance, but by the rare moment when they choose closeness despite it. They may spend years mastering the art of retreat, yet for one person they reveal a side of themselves the world never sees. That sacrifice, that quiet surrender, is not weakness but the deepest form of strength, because it requires them to face their own shadow and step into vulnerability. It is here, in the presence of the one who mirrors their hidden self, that they rediscover their capacity for love.